The morning sun rose over the village of Bellevue, but something felt wrong. The marketplace, usually alive with voices and laughter, was strangely quiet. People walked slowly, their eyes searching for one thing: Ebony's stall. The small wooden table where she sold palm oil, fresh vegetables, and dried fish stood empty. No baskets, no bright cloth covering the goods. Just bare wood and dust. Women whispered to each other nervously. Children pointed and asked questions their mothers couldn't answer. Old men shook their heads and walked away in silence. For 15 years, Ebony had never missed a single market day. Rain or shine, sickness or health, she was always there. Her absence felt like a hole in the heart of the village. That evening, as the sun began to set, something even stranger happened. The great river that flowed beside the village began to change. The clear water turned dark, thick like mud. Fish floated to the surface, dead. The smell was terrible. Women who came to fetch water screamed and ran back home. By nightfall, the eldest man in the village, Baba Cola, stood at the riverbank. He touched the water and pulled his hand back quickly. He whispered one sentence that made everyone's blood run cold. Something sacred has been disturbed. To understand what happened, you must first know who Ebony was. She was not born into wealth or power. Her parents were simple farmers who died when she was very young. Ebony grew up alone, working hard for every meal, every piece of cloth, every small coin. But hardship did not make her bitter. It made her kind. When she finally saved enough money to open a small stall in the market, she did not act like other traders. She did not cheat with her measurements. She did not raise her prices when food was scarce. She did not shout insults at customers who bargained. Instead, she smiled. She listened. She helped. If a widow came to buy vegetables but had no money, Ebony would fill her basket and say, "Pay me next time." If a child was hungry, she would give them fruit and pretend she didn't see them take it. If an elder was too weak to carry their goods home, Ebony would close her stall early and walk them back herself. People loved her, not because she was loud or proud, but because she was quietly good. Mothers named their daughters after her. Young girls wanted to be like her. Even the men respected her, though she was just a woman selling simple things in the market. But not everyone loved Ebony. There was one man who hated her deeply. His name was Madaki. He was the richest trader in all of Bellevue. He sold expensive cloth from far lands, shiny jewelry, and fine leather goods. His stall was 3 times larger than anyone else's. He wore rings on every finger and beads around his neck that clicked when he walked. Everyone knew Madaki had money. He made sure of it. But Madaki had a problem. Despite all his wealth, people did not respect him the way they respected Ebony. They came to his stall because they needed what he sold, but they did not smile when they saw him. They did not greet him warmly. They did not trust him. And this made Madaki's heart burn with anger. Why do they love her? He would ask himself every day, watching Ebony's stall from across the market. She sells common things. I sell treasures. She is poor. I am rich. Yet they treat her like a queen and me like a stranger. Madaki believed that respect should be bought with gold. He thought if you had more money than others, you deserved more honor. But the people of Bellevue did not think this way. They honored good character over good coins. Every time someone praised Ebony's kindness, Madaki's hatred grew stronger. Every time she helped someone for free, he felt insulted. His envy became poison in his heart. And one day, that poison turned into a plan. It started with a single rumor. One afternoon, while women were buying vegetables, someone whispered near Ebony's stall, "Have you noticed? Ebony's goods never spoil. Even in the hot sun, her vegetables stay fresh. How is that possible?" Another woman frowned and said quietly, "Maybe she uses something. You know. Something unnatural." The whisper spread like smoke through dry grass. By the next market day, more people were talking. Her prices are always fair, even when other traders are suffering. How does she do it? Another voice added, Perhaps she made a deal with something dark. Perhaps her kindness is just a mask. Ebony noticed the change immediately. Customers who used to smile at her now looked away. Mothers who once sent their children to her stall now kept them close. People bought from her quickly and left without conversation. Some stopped coming altogether. She tried to ask what was wrong, but no one would speak directly. They just shook their heads and hurried away. Ebony felt confused and hurt. She had done nothing wrong. She had only tried to be fair and kind. Why were people suddenly afraid of her? Then one morning 3 village elders appeared at her stall. Their faces were serious. The oldest one spoke firmly. "Ebony, you must come to the village square tonight. There are questions that need answers." That evening, the entire village gathered in the square. Torches burned bright against the darkness. Ebony stood in the center, surrounded by hundreds of eyes. Her hands trembled, but she kept her head up. The elders sat on wooden stools, their faces hard like stone. Madaki stood among the crowd, his arms folded, a small smile hidden on his lips. This was exactly what he wanted. The eldest spoke loudly for all to hear. "Ebony, daughter of this village, there are accusations against you. People say your success is not natural. They say you use powers we do not understand. They say you have brought a curse upon us." Ebony's mouth opened in shock. "A curse? I have done nothing but help people. I have never harmed anyone." But the elder raised his hand. "Then explain why your goods never spoil. Explain why you always have enough when others suffer. Explain why you seem blessed while others struggle." Before Ebony could answer, Madaki stepped forward. "I have seen it myself," he lied smoothly. "Her stall glows at night. I have heard her whispering strange words. She is hiding something." The crowd murmured in fear. Someone shouted, "Get rid of her." Another voice screamed, "She will destroy us all." Ebony tried to speak, but no one would listen. Young men rushed forward and overturned her stall. Her baskets crashed to the ground. Her goods scattered in the dust. She stood there, tears streaming down her face, watching everything she had worked for destroyed in moments. The next morning, Ebony did not go to the market. For the first time in 15 years, her stall remained empty. She stayed in her small hut at the edge of the village, sitting quietly by the window. She did not cry anymore. She simply looked out at the trees and the sky and thought about everything that had happened. The people who had destroyed her stall expected her to beg for forgiveness. They expected her to plead for another chance. But Ebony did nothing. She just stayed home. The market felt strange that day. Even though all the other stalls were full of goods, something felt missing. The air felt heavier. Conversations felt shorter. Laughter sounded forced. People moved through the market quickly, like they wanted to leave as soon as possible. By midday, the sky began to change. Clouds gathered thick and dark, but no rain fell. The wind blew cold, making people pull their clothes tighter. Animals in the village became restless. Goats bleated nervously. Chickens refused to leave their coops. Dogs howled at nothing. That evening, something impossible happened. The great river, which had flowed through Bellevue for hundreds of years, slowed down. Then it stopped completely. The water sat still like a pool of dark glass. No current, no movement, just silence. Women went to fetch water and came back empty-handed, their faces pale with fear. "The river refuses to flow," they whispered. Within 3 days, the darkness grew worse. Goats that were healthy suddenly refused to eat. They stood in their pens, shaking, their eyes wide with fear. Cows stopped giving milk. Chickens stopped laying eggs. The animals sensed something the people did not yet fully understand. Then the children began to fall ill. It started with fever, then weakness, then strange nightmares. They cried out in their sleep, speaking of shadows that followed them. Mothers stayed awake all night, fanning their children, praying to ancestors, burning protective herbs. But nothing helped. The worst part was the shadows themselves. In Bellevue, shadows had always behaved like shadows should. They appeared when the sun was high and disappeared when night came. But now, shadows lingered even after the sun moved. They stretched too long. They appeared in places they shouldn't. People saw their own shadows moving slightly out of sync with their bodies. Old women refused to leave their homes after sunset. Men carried charms around their necks. The village felt like it was holding its breath, waiting for something terrible to happen. The elders called for a gathering. They decided to perform the old rituals, the ones used when darkness threatened the land. Drums were brought out, blessed by the oldest priests. But when the drummers tried to play, the drums made no sound. The leather was intact. The wood was strong. But no matter how hard they struck, only silence came out. Hunters who went into the forest returned with strange stories. They said the forest had changed. Trees that were once familiar now seemed different, taller, closer together. Paths they had walked for years suddenly led nowhere. And worst of all, they heard whispers. Not the whispers of other people, but voices that seemed to come from the trees themselves. Soft, mocking voices that said, "She is gone. She is gone. You drove her away." The bravest hunters tried to ignore the voices and continue deeper into the forest, but they felt eyes watching them from every shadow. One hunter swore he saw faces in the tree bark. Another claimed vines moved on their own, reaching toward him like fingers. A third said he heard laughter echoing through the leaves, though he was completely alone. The elders gathered again, this time in secret. They were frightened now, though they tried to hide it. They discussed what was happening and why. Some blamed evil spirits. Others spoke of angry ancestors. But one elder, the oldest and wisest among them, finally spoke the truth they all feared. "This is not about spirits or ancestors," he said slowly. "This is about balance." The market was balanced by something pure, something good. When we drove that goodness away, the balance broke. Darkness rushed in to fill the empty space. The other elders stared at him in silence. They all knew exactly what he meant. They all knew exactly who he was talking about. There was a woman in the village named Ayaoro. She was ancient, some said over 100 years old. She had been blind since birth, but everyone knew she saw more than those with working eyes. People came to her for wisdom, for healing, for truth. She rarely left her small hut, but when she spoke, the entire village listened. The morning after the elders' secret meeting, Ayaoro walked slowly into the village square. Her walking stick tapped against the ground, tap, tap, tap. People stopped what they were doing and turned to watch her. She stood in the center of the square and called out in a voice surprisingly strong for someone so old. "Bellevue," she said. "You are dying because you killed your own heart." The crowd gathered around her, silent and afraid. She continued. The market was not balanced by gold or goods. It was balanced by a living heart. A heart that gave without taking. A heart that loved without expecting. When you broke that heart, you broke the village itself. Madaki stood at the back of the crowd. His face was calm, but inside his stomach twisted with fear. He wanted to walk away, but his feet would not move. Ayaoro turned her blind eyes in his direction, as if she could see him perfectly. "The one who planted lies will harvest thorns," she said quietly. "Darkness knows its master." That night Madaki could not sleep. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw water. Dark, cold water rising around him. Despite Ayaoro's warning, Madaki refused to accept responsibility. The next morning, he stood in the market square and laughed loudly. "You all believe the words of a blind old woman," he shouted. "This darkness is just coincidence. Bad weather. Strange timing. Nothing more." Some people wanted to believe him. It was easier to believe in coincidence than to admit they had made a terrible mistake. Madaki continued, his voice full of false confidence. "We are strong people. We do not need Abony. We do not need anyone. The river will flow again. The children will heal. Everything will return to normal." A few men nodded in agreement. Some women whispered that maybe Madaki was right. Fear makes people believe comfortable lies instead of uncomfortable truths. But that night, Madaki's confidence shattered. He went to bed feeling proud of his speech, certain he had convinced the village. But when sleep came, so did the nightmares. He dreamed he was standing in the market. Everything was normal at first. Then water began to seep up from the ground. Slowly at first, then faster. It rose to his ankles, his knees, his waist. He tried to run, but his legs moved like stone. He tried to scream, but water filled his mouth. He saw Abani standing on dry ground, watching him drown. She did not smile. She did not speak. She just watched with sad, knowing eyes. Madaki woke up gasping, his bed soaked with sweat. The elders finally swallowed their pride. They had no choice. The village was dying. Children were still sick. The river was still frozen. Crops in the fields were turning brown despite recent rain. They walked together to Abani's hut at the edge of the village, their heads lowered in shame. Abani was sitting outside when they arrived, weaving a basket from dried grass. She looked up but did not stand. She did not smile. She simply waited. The eldest spoke first, his voice shaking slightly. Abani, daughter of Bellevue, we have come to ask for your forgiveness. We were wrong. We listened to lies. We destroyed what was good. Please, we beg you, return to the market. Help us restore balance. The other elders nodded, some with tears in their eyes. They knew they had failed her. They knew they had failed the entire village. Abani looked at each of them slowly. Then she spoke, her voice calm but different somehow. Harder. You want me to return. To sell my goods again. To smile while you buy from me, knowing you did not defend me when I needed you. The elders shifted uncomfortably. One tried to speak, but Abani raised her hand. I gave this village 15 years of honesty, 15 years of kindness. And you threw it in the dust because of one man's lies. We know, the eldest whispered. We know we were wrong. Abani stood up slowly. Then you also know my answer. She looked at them with eyes that no longer held warmth. No, I will not return. The elders stood frozen, unable to believe what they had just heard. One of them stepped forward desperately. But Abani, the children are dying. The river will not flow. The village needs you. Abani's face remained calm. The village needs justice, not me. She walked closer to them, and for the first time they noticed something different about her. She seemed taller somehow. Her presence felt stronger, almost overwhelming. I never told anyone the full truth, she said quietly. When I opened my stall 15 years ago, I did not just sell goods. I made a promise to the spirits of the land. I promised to keep balance in the market. To make sure greed did not destroy fairness. To protect the weak from the strong. The elders' eyes widened. Abani continued. Every day I worked, I was keeping that promise. My kindness was not just kindness. It was a shield protecting this village from darkness. When you destroyed my stall, you did not just hurt me. You broke the promise. You removed the shield. Then we will rebuild it, one elder said quickly. We will give you a bigger stall, better goods, more money. Abani shook her head slowly. You cannot rebuild trust with gold. The spirits do not care about money. They care about truth. And the truth is, this village chose lies over me. Now the spirits demand payment for the broken promise. What kind of payment? The eldest asked, his voice barely a whisper. Abani's eyes grew distant. That is not for me to decide anymore. The debt is between Bellevue and the darkness now. The next morning something extraordinary happened. At dawn, when the first light touched the river, people heard a voice. It was not loud, but everyone in the village heard it clearly, as if it spoke directly inside their heads. The voice came from the river itself. Deep, ancient, neither male nor female. It said simply, bring the truth or starve. Women dropped their water pots. Men stopped in the middle of the road. Children clung to their mothers. The entire village stood still, listening to the silence that followed the voice. Within an hour, everyone gathered in the square. No one had called a meeting, but everyone knew they needed to be there. The elders stood at the front, their faces grave. Ioro sat on a stool nearby, her blind eyes seeing everything. "The spirits have spoken," the eldest said. "We must bring forward the truth. Someone in this village knows why Abony was accused. Someone knows who started the lies." The crowd murmured nervously. Eyes darted back and forth. Everyone suspected, but no one wanted to speak first. Then, slowly, people began to look in one direction. Toward the back of the crowd. Toward the man who stood alone, dressed in fine clothes. His face carefully blank. Madaki felt hundreds of eyes on him. He tried to smile, tried to act confused, but his hands were shaking. One by one, voices began to speak. It was him. He started the rumors. I heard him whisper lies about Abony. Madaki's face turned red with anger. "You have no proof," he shouted. "You cannot accuse me without proof." But the voices continued, louder now, braver. A woman stepped forward. "I heard you tell people Abony used dark magic. You said you saw her stall glowing at night." Another man added, "You offered me money to spread rumors about her. I refused, but others did not." More and more people came forward, each sharing what they knew, what they had seen, what they had heard. The truth poured out like water breaking through a dam. Madaki tried to deny everything, but his voice grew weaker with each accusation. Finally, the eldest elder pointed directly at him. "Madaki, son of greed, speak the truth now. Did you plot against Abony? Did you lie to turn this village against her?" Madaki's mouth opened and closed like a fish out of water. He wanted to lie, wanted to escape, but something stopped him. Perhaps it was fear. Perhaps it was the weight of all those eyes. Perhaps it was the memory of his nightmare. "She had what I could not buy," he finally whispered. The crowd leaned forward to hear. Madaki's voice grew stronger, filled with bitter anger. "Respect, love, trust. I had gold, but she had their hearts. It was not fair. So yes, I spread lies. Yes, I destroyed her. And I would do it again." The moment he finished speaking, the ground beneath everyone's feet trembled. Just slightly, just enough to make people gasp and grab each other for balance. The river's voice returned, louder this time. "The truth has been spoken. Now comes the choice." Everyone turned toward the river, but the voice seemed to come from everywhere at once. A promise was broken. A shield was removed. Balance must be restored. Someone must take the place of the one who was driven away. The elders looked at each other in confusion and fear. "What does that mean?" one asked. "Take her place how?" Ioro stood up slowly, her ancient voice clear. "The spirits require a new guardian. Someone must promise to protect balance in the market, to stand against greed, to shield the weak. But this time the promise carries a cost." "What cost?" the eldest asked, though he seemed afraid of the answer. "The guardian must give up their own freedom," Ioro said. "They must become part of the land itself, forever watching, forever protecting, forever bound." Silence fell over the village. No one moved. No one wanted to volunteer for such a fate. It was essentially a death sentence, or worse than death. Eternal service with no rest, no peace, no escape. Then, surprisingly, Madaki stepped forward. The crowd gasped. He walked to the center of the square, his chin raised high. "I will do it," he said loudly. "I will take her place. I will be the guardian." People whispered in shock. Was this redemption? Was Madaki finally showing courage? The elders looked uncertain. Madaki continued. "I am the richest man here. Clearly I am the strongest choice. I will restore balance." The moment Madaki finished speaking, the air grew cold. The wind stopped completely. Even the birds fell silent. The river's voice returned, but this time it sounded almost amused. "You offer yourself?" the voice asked. You who destroyed balance, now claim you will protect it. Madaki's confidence began to crack, but he stood firm. Yes, I am ready. Then let us see what you truly are. Before anyone could react, the ground beneath Madaki began to change. It softened like mud, and his feet started sinking. He tried to step back, but he could not move. Wait, he shouted, panic filling his voice. What is happening? The voice answered coldly. You offered yourself with pride, not repentance. You sought to save yourself, not the village. The spirits do not accept false sacrifice. Madaki's legs sank deeper. He screamed, clawing at the air, reaching for help. People rushed forward to pull him out, but Ioro raised her hand. Do not interfere. The spirits are judging him now. This is his path. Please. Madaki begged, tears streaming down his face. I am sorry. I will change. Give me another chance. But the spirits had made their decision. Madaki's body continued sinking, but not into the earth. Instead, his skin began to turn gray. Hard. Rough. He was turning to stone. His screams became weaker. His movements slowed. Within minutes, Madaki was no longer a man. He was a statue, frozen in the act of reaching upward. His face locked in eternal terror. But his eyes remained alive. People stared in horror at what Madaki had become. A statue of gray stone standing in the center of the village square. But the most terrifying part was his eyes. They moved. They blinked. They looked around with full awareness. Madaki was not dead. He was trapped. Trapped inside his own body, unable to move, unable to speak, unable to do anything but watch. He could see everyone staring at him. He could hear their whispered prayers. He could feel the sun warming the stone during the day and the cold biting at night. But he could do nothing. The river's voice spoke one final time. Let this be a lesson to all who see him. Greed turns the heart to stone long before the body follows. This man will stand here forever, watching the market he tried to destroy. He will see kindness rewarded and honesty honored. He will witness what he could have been but chose not to be. This is his punishment. This is his purpose. The wind began to blow again, gentle and warm. The dark clouds that had covered the sky for days started to break apart. Sunlight poured through, bright and clean. And then, miraculously, the river began to move. Slowly at first, just a trickle. Then stronger. Within minutes, the great river was flowing again, clear and pure. The dark water was gone. Fish jumped joyfully in the current. Women ran to fill their pots, laughing and crying at the same time. The darkness that had pressed down on the village lifted like a heavy blanket being pulled away. By evening, more miracles appeared. Children who had been sick for days suddenly opened their eyes, clear and bright. Their fevers broke. Their nightmares ended. They sat up asking for food, making their mothers weep with relief. The animals returned to normal as well. Goats began eating again. Cows gave milk. Chickens laid eggs. Even the dogs stopped howling and went back to playing with the children. The shadows, which had lingered too long and moved strangely, returned to their proper behavior. They appeared when they should and disappeared when they should. The village felt clean again, safe again, balanced again. But while everyone else celebrated, Abani sat alone in her hut. She heard the cheers and songs from the village square. She heard drums beating joyfully and children laughing. But she did not join them. She understood what had happened. The spirits had taken their payment. The balance was restored. But that did not erase the pain of what she had suffered. It did not bring back the trust that had been broken. It did not heal the betrayal she had felt when her own people turned against her. That evening, the elders came to her hut again. This time they brought gifts, baskets of food, fine cloth, jewelry, coins. They placed everything at her feet and knelt before her. Abani, the eldest said, the darkness has lifted. The village is saved. And it is all because of you. You were right. You were always right. The eldest continued. his voice filled with emotion. "We want to honor you properly now. We want to make you the head of the market. You will have the largest stall, the best position, and the authority over all trade. You will be respected as you should have been from the beginning. We will give you wealth, power, everything you deserve." The other elders nodded eagerly, adding their own promises. "You will never want for anything again. Your name will be honored for generations. We will build a statue of you in the square. Children will sing songs about your kindness." Ebony looked at each of them. Then she looked at the gifts piled at her feet. Slowly she shook her head. "No," she said simply. The elders stared at her in shock. But why?" one stammered. "This is everything anyone could want. You would have authority, respect, wealth." Ebony smiled sadly. "You still do not understand. I did not help people because I wanted power. I did not show kindness because I wanted wealth. I did it because it was right. And when you asked me to return, I refused not because I wanted revenge, but because returning would have been accepting your definition of worth." She stood up and walked to the door of her hut. "You offer me treasure and titles now, after I was vindicated. But where were these offers when I was being accused? Where was this honor when I needed defenders, not gifts?" The elders lowered their heads in shame. They had no answer because the answer was clear. They only valued her now because they feared losing her again. Ebony continued, her voice gentle but firm. "I do not want your gold. I do not want your titles. I do not want to return to who I was because I am no longer that person. Pain changes people. Betrayal teaches lessons that comfort never can." The eldest looked up at her with tears in his eyes. "Then what will you do? Where will you go?" Ebony walked outside and looked up at the stars beginning to appear in the evening sky. "I will stay in Bellevue, but I will not return to the market. Instead, I will become something else. Something needed more than a trader." "What is that?" they asked. "A guide," she answered. "There will be others like me. People who are wrongly accused. People who are betrayed by those they trust. People who suffer because they chose goodness over greed. When those people need someone to help them stand again, I will be here." The elders were quiet for a long moment. Then the eldest stood and placed his hand over his heart. "You are wiser than all of us combined, Ebony. The village does not deserve you, but we are grateful you choose to stay." Ebony smiled, this time more warmly. "The village is not one thing. It is many people. Some good, some bad, some still learning. I stay not for revenge or reward, but because even after everything, this is still my home." From that day forward, Ebony became a teacher and a counselor. People came to her with their troubles, their questions, their pain. And she helped them not by giving answers, but by showing them how to find strength within themselves. As weeks passed, the market of Bellevue truly changed. Traders began to watch each other more carefully. When someone tried to cheat, others would stop them. When someone was struggling, others would help. The spirit of fairness that Ebony had embodied began spreading through the entire marketplace. One trader started measuring his grain honestly, even when customers were not looking. Another refused to raise prices during shortages, even though she could have made more money. Young people entering the market for the first time were taught by their elders, "Trade fairly, or you will end up like him." And when they said him, they meant the statue that still stood in the village square. Madaki's stone form remained there, his living eyes watching everything. The village decided not to remove him. He served as a reminder, a warning, a lesson that could never be forgotten. Mothers would bring their children to see the statue and tell them the story. "This man had everything except a good heart," they would say. "He chose gold over goodness, pride over people. Look at his eyes. He sees everything now, but he can do nothing." That is what happens when greed turns your heart to stone. Some people felt pity for Madaki. They would leave food near the statue, though he could not eat it. They would speak kind words, though he could not respond. But most people simply used him as a teaching tool, a permanent reminder that the village would never forget. The market flourished under its new spirit of honesty. Trade increased. More people came from neighboring villages to buy and sell. They said Bellebue's market felt different, blessed somehow. Children were curious by nature, and the stone statue fascinated them. They would gather around it during market days, touching the cold surface, staring into those moving eyes. One day, a young girl named Amma asked her grandmother the question that many children wondered. "Mama, why do his eyes still move if he is stone?" The grandmother sat down on a nearby bench and pulled Amma close. "Because, my child, the spirits wanted him to learn. If he had simply died, he would have learned nothing. If he had turned completely to stone, he would feel nothing. But this way he must watch. He must see. He must understand what he destroyed." Another child, a boy named Tund, asked, "Will he ever turn back into a man?" The grandmother shook her head slowly. "No one knows. The spirits did not say. Perhaps one day, if he truly learns his lesson, if his heart somehow changes even while trapped in stone, perhaps then he will be freed. Or perhaps this is forever. That is not for us to decide." "Is he sorry?" Amma asked, looking up at the statue's frozen face. "Look into his eyes," the grandmother said. "What do you see?" The children stared carefully. In Madaki's stone eyes, beneath the fear, beneath the horror, there was something else. Regret. Deep, endless regret. His eyes moved from face to face in the market, watching people treat each other with kindness and honesty. He saw what the market could have been all along if he had chosen differently. "I think he is sorry," Amma said softly. "But it is too late." "That," the grandmother said, "is the saddest part of his punishment." Years passed, and the village continued to grow. New children were born who never knew the time of darkness. New traders arrived who heard about Bellebue's honest market and wanted to be part of it. But the elders made sure the story was never forgotten. Once a year, on the anniversary of the day Abani's stall was destroyed, the entire village would gather in the square. They would tell the complete story from beginning to end. They would speak of Abani's kindness, Madaki's greed, the darkness that came, and the price that was paid. During these gatherings, people would admit their own small sins. One man would stand and say, "I was there when they accused Abani, and I said nothing. I was a coward, and I am sorry." A woman would confess, "I heard the lies about Abani, and I helped spread them. I did not think about truth, only gossip." These confessions were not meant to shame people, but to remind everyone that the village's mistake was not one person's fault. It was collective. They all played a part, either by action or by silence. And acknowledging that truth kept them humble. Abani would attend these gatherings, sitting quietly among the people. She never spoke during the confessions, never pointed fingers, never said, "I told you so." She simply listened, and her presence reminded everyone of what they had almost lost. After the confessions, there would be celebration. Music, dancing, food. The anniversary became not just a day of remembrance but also a day of hope. A reminder that mistakes can be lessons. That darkness can teach us to value light. As Abani grew older, her hair turned silver, and lines appeared on her face. But she remained strong in spirit, still helping those who needed guidance, still teaching by example. She never married. She never became wealthy. She lived simply in her small hut at the edge of the village, and that was exactly how she wanted it. One morning when she was very old, Abani stood at her door and looked out at Bellebue. She saw the market thriving. She saw children playing without fear. She saw the statue still standing in the square, a permanent guardian of the lessons learned. She smiled. That afternoon, she walked through the village slowly, saying goodbye to people without telling them. Continue. 11:33 p.m. It was goodbye. She touched children's heads in blessing. She embraced old friends. She stopped at the market and looked at each stall with pride, seeing how much had changed. Finally, she stood before Madaki's statue. His eyes found her immediately, and in them she saw everything. Sorrow, regret, understanding. She reached out and touched the cold stone. "You taught this village something I could not teach with kindness alone," she said softly. "You showed them the cost of choosing wrong. Thank you for that, even though it was not your intention." A single tear rolled down from Modoki's stone eye. It was the only movement his body could still make. Abani wiped it away gently. Then she turned and walked away from the village, toward the forest path. Some say she went to live among the spirits who had protected her. Others say she simply wanted to see the world beyond Bellevue before she died. No one followed her. Everyone understood she had earned her peace. The village never saw Abani again, but they felt her presence always. When traders were tempted to cheat, they would remember her face. When someone needed help, others would ask themselves, what would Abani do? Her spirit lived in every honest transaction, every act of kindness, every moment of choosing right over easy. The stone statue of Modoki remained in the square for generations. Eventually, moss grew on parts of it. Birds made nests in the crevices. But the eyes never stopped moving, never stopped watching. Some say that on quiet nights, if you listen carefully, you can hear the statue weeping. Not with sound, but with the silence of eternal regret. The market of Bellevue became famous throughout the land. People traveled from far away to trade there, knowing they would be treated fairly. And when visitors asked why this market was different, the people would tell them the story. The story of a woman whose kindness held back darkness. The story of a man whose greed brought it forth. The story of a village that learned the hardest lesson of all.